Welcome to the Borderlands Trail and Ultra Running Podcast. Wolfie had this great idea a little bit ago to what he called the states debates. And it's just this fun approach where, man, what a great race. What an exciting thing. We are fans of that race. I will never compete in that race. I may run it someday, but Lord knows I won't compete in it. And so, but I get excited every year and it sneaks up on me. And I got about 2 weeks before, a week before, and I'm all in. I'm trying to get caught up on the storylines. And so this year we thought, let's dig in earlier than normal on this race. And before we get into the field, into the 2025 version of the race, let's spend a few weeks and a few episodes talking about like the bigger picture of Western States. So we had the first episode where Brian debated Troy. And in that episode, we looked at, is Western States, can they rest on their laurels? If they just are who they are and keep going, are they threatened by some other bigger race organization coming in, swooping in, and taking over the great American 100-mile like national championship, world championship from Western States? It was a great debate, an enjoyable debate. And then we brought on another icon, Andy Jones-Wilkins, to debate with Brian on who is the GOAT of Western States. Was it Jurek or is it Walmsley? It was a fun back and forth, and Andy was just a treat to have on. It was a good time. But today, you'll see my shirt for those of you watching on YouTube. It's Karl Speedgoat Meltzer. I'm so stoked to have him here with us today. I've ran his race, Speedgoat, 3 times. I've finished it twice. I've shaken his hand all 3 times after Miller Hill just destroyed me on one of them, which I've always said that Miller Hill is the worst name for a mountain because you see it on the map and you think, oh, Miller Hill, that'll be fine. At least it's not one of these other crazy peaks. But man, it got me one day. I ran out of water. Either way, it was always a treat to cross that finish line at Speedgoat because Karl was always there for everybody shaking their hands, and it's speaks to your character, speaks to who you are. But then we all know the shoe. We know so much of your of what you've contributed to the sport, and you're still going strong. So before we go any further, Karl, thanks for joining us. It's a real treat. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Josh. It should be a good debate.
Yes. Okay. So let me tee this up, and then we'll get going. So the debate, this shocked me when Brian was like, hey, let's do a debate where it's Nike versus Hoka. And I thought, I'm assuming who is going to take Hoka? It's probably going to be Brian. So we need to find someone to take Nike because Brian hates Nike. He's audibly has disdain for Nike. So why is he taking the Nike position? I'm excited to learn that today. And so then we thought, let's get someone on to take the Hoka position. And the question is who is the better sponsor for Western States? I think on its surface, it's an interesting question, but as we dig in deep, I think it's relevant because I look at Hoka as an example at Speedgoat's race. Hoka was a long partner. I learned how to say one because Karl one day introduced them at the race, and I was like, I always thought it was 1-1. Like, you're a long-term partner with Hoka. A good partner at a race elevates the race. And so I think that's why this is a material discussion. So that's it for me. I'm going to tee this up. I'm the timekeeper. We're going to have opening arguments, responses, discussions, and closing arguments. Okay. So I'm going to go on mute. I'm in France. It's nighttime here. It's daytime for you guys. I'm going to be drinking some wine, eating some popcorn, watching you guys go back and forth. So we're going to have a 5-minute opening statement from Wolfie taking the position that Nike is the better partner for Western States. Are you ready?
Let's go. I'm ready.
All right, go.
Anybody who's listened to the podcast, they already know it's a shock to hear me come on and say anything positive of Nike. But I think it was only going to be Nike that I could do justice for the respect that I have for Hoka as a trail running shoe, to bring on the Speedgoat himself, the legend, the GOAT, right? I mean, he is the equivalent within trail running to Michael Jordan, somebody that Nike's put on the map, with building basketball and a culture around the game of basketball. And I think that's kind of where I want to go with this is like, here we have the GOAT himself and he's got a shoe named after him, but there's not any sort of like legacy that Hoka's doing really to carry that forward, whether it's, at Western States or UTMB, many trail runners put on a pair of Speedgoats, I think, across the world and probably don't know who they're named after. And I think that that's only going to continue to grow in volume. And so that's kind of the angle I'm taking from this, is that with great power comes greater responsibility. Hoka's massive, today in trail running and lifestyle casual wear, from where they were, when Karl first got, introduced to the founders and the shoes. And I'd love to see them take a more aggressive approach. I think what I dislike about Nike, Hoka could do benefit from, to, grab a sport and start shaping the culture and the narrative around it. And in North America, Western States is that opportunity. They are the presenting title sponsor, other than a couple inflatable banners that you see that people run through at night. I don't know what else they're really known for. They don't really have, any sort of identity. They're known for, like I said, maybe seeing, stroller moms pushing, their kids around the mall more so than they're known for Jim Walmsley winning in the Alps or anything else that's been done in Auburn. And that's where I think this conversation's, most valuable, is to say, what can we do to push Hoka along, to say it's not enough to just have a monopoly as the presenting, title sponsor for the biggest race here in North America and in Chamonix. You got to do more. And I want you to do more, because I don't want to see Nike come in 10 years later after they've already, proven that it's a financial gain for them, and just pull the rug out from underneath the sport. And now it's owned and co-opted by Nike. But again, if they're not going to do it, and Nike's going to come in and do it, and they've shown they can do it well, look what they did with Elliott Kipchoge. The road marathon was, probably a little bit lackluster and losing some of its excitement. And you come in with Breaking 2, that was completely a Nike Ineos funded project, and it lit the sport on fire again. Sold a whole shoe. Why don't we do something like that? What was the name of that documentary around Western States or UTMB that Hoka did with Jim Walmsley, the greatest trail runner we've seen? I'll give you a minute. There isn't one, right? And so, again, just more missed opportunities. So I'll leave it there. I think we're going to have a fun, respectful conversation. This comes for love. I don't want Nike to do this, but I'm going to have to take their side of it on this debate.
All right, Karl, you ready?
Yeah.
Take it away.
Yeah, I think for the listeners out there, for some of them who don't know me, I was the very first athlete with Hoka in 2009. I met Nico and Jean-Luc and those guys, and they gave me that big fat Lafati shoe. And I was convinced right away that it was, something different from the minimalist shoe, right? But go fast forward to, why I think Hoka is a good fit for Western. There's a couple of good reasons that I feel. From a Nike perspective, you don't really see Nike in the trail running scene. From a track scene, absolutely. From the road marathon, absolutely. I mean, they're the kings. We see it in the Olympics. The Nike's on the shirts in the Olympics just about. So that's their space, and more power to them at the moment. But I think in the trail running space, when Hoka came in 2009, and they started this craze over this big fat funky looking shoe that Karl was wearing at Zane Grey, it blew out of control very quickly, and I think the whole idea behind Hoka when they started with Nico, when he told me, is we want people to run downhill fast, with the padded shoe, right? And so they started right with the trail space. Granted, now they've moved over to initially they called themselves they didn't call themselves a fashion brand. They called themselves a performance brand. That's when the CEO at Hoka at that time told me, we're a performance brand. We want to, make a product that performs well. It's not so much about fashion. Then, of course, as the time goes by, more money spent, it comes out with the Bondi and then the Clifton, where it is a road shoe. So they have to move into the road sector to actually build their brand, because about 3 to 5% of runners in the world are trail runners. And that may have grown a little bit over the last couple of years, but because it has been growing. But at the same time, Hoka was pushing that trail and pushing that trail stuff. So now, as you mentioned, you're right. You do see a few videos of the moms pushing the stroller around, maybe the nurse walking around with the white Hokas on, the UPS driver with the brown ones or whatever. But I think on that scale, that's how you have to grow your brand. You can't just say, okay, we're going to take these 3% of the runners in the world and be Hoka, because you're not really going to survive. They have to go into the road world. But I think from the starting perspective of the trail, Hoka started this whole craze of the, call it the fat running shoe or whatever. All these other brands are now following suit. I looked up Nike on the web just before the thing here and looked at their trail shoes. And I mean, I don't know. I've never worn them, so I can't really vouch for what they're good or bad or whatever. But at the same time, there's not a big selection there. I think Hoka is more involved in the trail scene than Nike. Nike did try to bring some players into the game, which was Vargo and Gelfi and Tollefson were all Nike runners maybe 10 years ago, I'm guessing, something like that. But it quickly, those guys were on the team and then they weren't on the team. It's almost like Nike tried to get in, but then they said, well, I don't know if this is worth our time. But I think Hoka is really invested in the trail scene now far more than Nike is, which I think from a Western States perspective, and from me being an RD for many years, I want a company that's invested in the trail running company. I mean, not just if the Speedgoat race was all Nike, people might look at me and say, huh? Like, really, Nike? Wow, that's kind of surprising. But Hoka's not surprising. And I get what you're saying, Wolfie, about like, they put up a few banners and inflatable things and they make it dress it up a little bit, look kind of nice. I think you're right. I think they can go bigger. They can tell more stories of their elite athletes. I think like whether it's with me or with Jim or with Hayden or whatever, and I'm old and slow now, so they probably want to go with Jim. But at the same time, I agree with that a little bit. But I think Western States is a good partner with Hoka because not only is it just Western States, it's UTMB World Series is a whole another big ball of wax, which is, I mean, growing exponentially too. When Hoka signed on with UTMB, this was a couple years ago, I remember how excited they were about that. Then they tie in Western States. It seems like a natural fit for Western to have Hoka as their primary sponsor. I think like I said, you're right about the filming and the things like that. But Hoka, they were a performance brand to start. I think it's starting to tilt towards that fashion brand, of course, because that's what sells $2 billion a year. I mean, Nike did $49 billion last year, which was down about $2 billion. Maybe Hoka took that too and took it, but however it went. But I think they're just the better fit than Nike because they're more involved in the trail scene than Nike is. It would be interesting. I'm sure Nike they certainly have the dollars to do it if they want to, to invest all that money. But I think they're better off staying in their world of the track and the road, which they've dominated, for a long time. I think they're just a better fit for that side. And then Hoka's better for Western because it's just trail. And I'd like to see Hoka they sponsor a lot of small races too. I mean, granted, those small races, you might see a banner and just one blow up thing, but it's still putting an individual eye. And Nike hasn't done that at all. So of the small races, because they're just kind of too big. So I think Hoka's just it's just better for Western to be involved with that type of brand that really is kind of all in. And all in is what it is for now. And again, I'd like to see more too, but we'll see. If I get to 100 hundreds, maybe there's a story on me. But I got to look at it. We'll see.
So what's funny in knowing Brian, you made some of his points of why he doesn't like, why he's opposed to Nike, and I'll review that here in a little bit. But I'm curious, Brian, what's a 3-minute rebuttal that you got here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're both kind of saying the same thing, just with different takes on what maybe the solution of it is. Again, what I think is frustrating is like Montrail and Ultra, I think, have been previous presenting title sponsors of Western States. And I don't see anything different in Hoka now as the presenting sponsor of Western States. Now, this is me talking with ignorance. I have no inside knowledge of what exactly the added. I'm assuming it's more expensive now. It's a bigger investment for Hoka, to carry that banner, and so it provides maybe more resources back for the board to utilize. But, again, I don't see much difference in how it's presented to the fan on the outside looking in. And I would love to be able to see that, it should be more dramatically different of like, hey, this is Hoka now. Like, I can see it. I can feel it. I experienced the race and I know it's got Hoka's thumbprint on it. I mean, you take a sport like golf, which, I know Karl's a big golfer as well. And like golf was not cool, in the early 90s before Tiger burst on the scene. But like what Nike saw in Tiger was like, hey, this is a guy that we're able to make cool, just by, associate ourselves with him. He's excellent. He's going to perform, but we're going to craft the narrative around him and present him to fan base that's never followed the game before. Well, I mean, Hoka could do the same thing. We've got some of the most interesting characters, I think, that play well in a sport that's really going through its renaissance period now as kind of fashion. You saw Jim Walmsley in that New York Times article. And again, I always reference back to that. Those pictures were captivating. I think anybody who read those that weren't even a trail runner fan wanted to read, learn more about it. And it's just curious, maybe Hoka plays it too safe, or, they just don't have it in their DNA as a company to want to do something like that.
Karl?
Yeah, I think we are sort of saying the same thing. I know I totally agree with you. I think one of the biggest problems in the at least in the U.S. anyway is Western States is limited to 370 runners or so, and that's never going to change because of the Granite Chief Wilderness thing. I think we're sort of limited to how big we can really go with it, because there's only that 375 in. You look at UTMB. And I don't know if either one of you guys have ever been over there for that event.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely over the top. 7 days in a row, there's got a race. There's 2,000, 3,000 people in each race. The entire town is buzzing with, you can hear the music, doon, 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 going around town the whole time. And I think that's almost, Western States is, it's super competitive. It's a fantastic race to watch. But it's not big enough to get global attention because the scale just doesn't look so big. And if you go to Western States, it's funny at the Western States, when I ran a couple years ago, I was still running for Red Bull. So, God, it was like 8 years ago when I wanted to try to break the 50 and over record. I guess it was 7 years ago. It's kind of funny, like Western States, when they set up there around the track there at the finish line, Red Bull had to pay a pretty good fee to get me in the race. They had to be a sponsor, then they had to pay it was like, I think it was like 10 grand, which was, thank you, Red Bull, for that. Pretty crazy that they supported me behind that. And then I failed breaking the record. But at the same time, all we saw at the finish line with Red Bull was 2 canopies with a little table around them. And that was what they got out of it. I don't think Western States, the race, drives to make it bigger either. They think that, hey, we're Western States, everyone's going to watch, we don't care. The sponsors, they take their money and they say, do what you want to do, dress it up as much as you can, but then there's limits of how much you can dress it up. Like, they didn't let Red Bull do crap. When I was pretty disappointed. Like, yeah, they gave him some cases of Red Bull for the aid stations, but big deal, okay. Western States has to also be involved with the dress up part of it, with the media part of it. I think we're still behind Europe in so many different ways when it comes to televised things. Western States needs to get on national television. I mean, Rick, I know that we all have different, television is different than it used to be. It's not NBC, ABC, CBS anymore. It's everything streaming, all this stuff. It's very, very different than it used to be. But that has to get on the big stage, on the New York Times stage, like the Boston Marathon stage, even though that coverage was terrible. Just the viewing part of it. But that it needs to get on that stage to get big. And I don't think in the U.S. we're there yet. And it's, will Hoka throw in the cost of what it takes to make that happen? I'd love to see that happen. Put Jim in the forefront. Put the storylines together of the actual race. I mean, I've talked to other race directors that run Rabbit Run. They talk about having a film there, and they'll say, we want to have these stories, the behind the scenes stories of the person that's trying to finish their first 100, or the, those types of stories. And to me, I mean, I've been an athlete all my life. I've been at the front of the field a lot, not anymore. But when I want to watch a race, I want to see the guys in the front. I want the storylines of the guys in the race in the front. And I think to bring that attention to the world, they need to do that more. And again, it takes the big media money to get that on the stage. An example is Diamond League track. I mean, Diamond League is, I love watching it. Some people find it probably boring. I love it because I'm a runner. But that, is put on a big stage. And what Michael Johnson's trying to do with his Grand Slam of track stuff, trying to put on the big stage to make it a bigger thing. But that's what has to happen. We can have all these streaming videos and all that, but it's just not the same without Phil Leggett and Bob Roll talking on the commentary either. You've got to have not this, Karl's making quesadillas at the aid station. Well, who cares,
Well, here's what I think.
Last year, they were doing it, and I was just like, where's Phil and Bob, I mean, we need the guys to really need a good commentator. I will say that when I was back at I keep bringing back UTMB just because it's a bigger scale, but when I dropped out of UTMB a couple of years ago, and I went back to my hotel and I turned on the TV, and it was on the national French channel, and Killian was racing Blanchard, the guy that raced when Killian outkicked him the last 10K or whatever it was. Yep. And when I was watching that, it was Phil Leggett and Bob Roll. I mean, it was a different guy, but those guys were really, really good. They'd bring back some comments of the other runners. They knew all about them. They had the earpiece in getting information. That's what has to happen in Western States to blow it out of the water. And Hoka I'd love to see them step that up. I mean, I know that they're trying, but again, it's like it comes down to, I mean, I don't know if Hoka has a budget. Like when I used to run for Red Bull, there was no budget. They'd write the check and do it because they got so much cash. But they need to step away from a budget and say, if we're going to make this sport really go exponentially large on a competitive stage, the dollars have to come, and it has to go global on the global stage on, I say TV, but the media perspective. It's got to be on, CNN tonight or ABC News. Someone throws in the Western States 400 happened this weekend. Most people be like, "What? I can't drive that far." We hear that all the time. But that's what I think needs to happen for it to go off the chart, and we're still waiting for that day, I think.
Here's what I think is interesting is that, okay, thinking of the two positions here as we just go into discussion, is that there is a third player here. The premise of this was if Nike was in, it would be this, but Hoka's in, so it's like this. I think Karl raises an interesting point that maybe it doesn't matter whose money is in because we've got Western States acting as, call it what you will, negative or positive, gatekeeper, all that. So I think I just want to acknowledge that. I think that's a really interesting point and probably even something worth noting here. Moving forward to say, let's assume that Western States were to open the gates wide and say it's just about the partner, not about their blocking. But I think that's probably a very material discussion to say, no matter even if Nike brought $1 billion, would Western States only allow a tint in a case of Red Bull?
It's very interesting how they don't. I mean, it's a great race, but they just don't go try to blow it out, I mean, Hard Rock's the exact not the opposite. Hard Rock's even way worse. That course is spectacular. The race is spectacular, but it's like they sit in their own little bubble down there, and it's a little family race around the San Juans.
Man, you are safe here. You are safe on this. But I mean, this is what we talk about. I think we're fairly aligned on this stuff.
Yeah, they're in their bubble, and that's how they do it, and that's how they love it so fine. But you're never going to be. You talk about growing, and it's like I don't think they know how to grow. Western States has the opportunity to grow, and now I think maybe they'll learn a bit from the Europeans about how to make this race that much better. I mean, this year has a ridiculously sick competitive field, men and women, and hopefully they've got to get the media attention, and they got to get Phil and Bob on the mic. I just think, I love watching the Tour de France. They can have a 5-hour race with a sprint finish, and those guys keep it interesting for 5 hours, at least from my perspective. Right. That's what we need in the sport for it to be recognized more globally. Western States is the right place to start, and I'm glad that Hoka's attached to them. because it helps Hoka obviously sell and all that stuff. But that's where it has to begin. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, no, that's a good point, Josh, to point out. I was going to say that too, that Western states is certainly complicit in not being an accommodating partner, right? Like they're not exactly their goals aren't aligned with somebody like a title sponsor like Hoka, right? I mean, like you said, Hoka could be on board to be bringing in, more revenue and more attention and more infrastructure and all these other things that just could be, a non-starter with the board that we have right now at Western States, or just the philosophy or what the race is ever going to be. But yeah, this year the field is incredible, and it's littered with some of the greatest Hoka trail runners that they have. They have assembled the deepest roster of trail runners, and you're hearing now that Unbreakable 2 is going to be released, and you would think that's probably going to directly be benefiting Hoka. But I'm sure the featured athletes there are going to be Hayden, Rod, Jim, and you talk about maybe getting it on streaming networks and things. Hoka could hopefully have come alongside of the production group there to try and finance some of that. It's not cheap, and Hoka's got the deepest pockets out of anybody in trail running right now. So yeah, if it's not this year, I don't know when. And just we could pivot off of Western States itself too. I know Jamil's a businessman, and he's got two golden ticket races. Hoka could do something like Solomon did with Hoka TV. They could do something with Golden Trail Series like Solomon does, just around the Golden Ticket Series. I've long thought that would be a more interesting, follow than Western States itself is following these Golden Ticket guys, as they go out and try and win, the limited entries into the biggest race. So we could pivot off of Western States and just still talk about Hoka being a title presenting sponsor of other Golden Ticket Series, and they could build out around there as well.
Well, it's like Red Bull TV too. Like Red Bull, when I was running for Red Bull, they came out with Red Bull TV and they produced their own films, and that became, it still is, of course, like a massive thing. With my film Made to Be Broken, that was like the second most viewed movie ever, like because they produced something, a storyline, a cool storyline, and it's interesting to bring us maybe a different comment about this, but there's no prize money at Western States, right? What if some rich guy comes in and says, okay, I'm going to throw $1 million prize purse on this race? Would that bring, I don't think it would bring more competition. They've got great competition. People want to race for competition. They don't necessarily care about the money, but if you put, the winner takes home 350 grand or whatever, a fairly significant amount of cash, that might bring a little bit more notoriety to it a little bit, or to the general public. Maybe they wouldn't care. I don't know. That's like an experiment of one. Who knows? But I think that would sort of make it interesting to see what would happen if that happened too. I've always been a big fan of prize money, and I helped start Run Rabbit Run. Their purse is 100 grand. The winner can take home a max of 17.5 if they have a team member, but the race doesn't get the field. It's okay, it's a good race, but it's not Western States.
Is it because it competes with UTMB? If you're,
I don't think so. I think the runners they want to run UTMB.
Right?
UTMB is a big dance. Run Rabbit Run is like this little race in Steamboat, which is a great race, and these guys do. Those race directors take no profit; they give it all away. They donate a lot. They donate $50,000 a year to their charities in town. They do fantastic for their town. They don't take any money. They give away 100 grand. And these other races like Western, UTMB now has a purse that's a little over 100, I think. So those guys are making money a little bit now, but it's still not a lot. It's like 15 grand is like, it's a nice check, but it's not. When I won 11 grand the first year, that was like a world changer for me. But it still isn't really a lot of money, I think. But you're right. I think they've got to grasp it and take take advantage of this Unbreakable too. I hope I imagine JB Benner's got to be one of the guys doing it. I know JB, the guy that did Unbreakable 1 there, which he did a cool job, and that was one of the first kind of cool films. Jeff Rose made the storyline when he came back from 22 minutes and won the race. That made it that much better. Anton running with Jen, the whole thing. And Killian with, when he was just barely coming onto the scene, that was a really, JB Bennett had a perfect timing for that. And again, this is perfect timing for this too. So they need to pull this one off.
Yeah.
If this film isn't spectacular, then it's just going to be another one of those films out there that's like, it's the race. But again, if they do put the race, I want to see it. Me personally, I don't want to see the backstories. I want to see the race, and I want people commentating on it. I want coverage to be not in and out, not, oh, we lost coverage in the canyons, or you know what? If Europe can do it, they have coverage every single place they go, and we can do it too. There's ways to do it. I mean, Starlink is amazing. That stuff is, I think it's doable, but it comes with a price. But you just have to throw it down and make that movie great, and that movie has to kind of hit the mainstream as opposed to just the trail runners. Because again, 3-5% trail runners, right? Like, okay, you got a million views. Well, a million views isn't shit. It's not,
Right.
It really isn't. You need like 100 million views. You need big numbers. And if those views ever come out, then maybe we'll see a little bit more in the sport, grow on the competitive side. But that's, yet to be determined. We'll see how they do with the film. I hope they do a great job. I hope they do a lot of their homework. When they do commentating on the race, they need to do their homework. If they don't do that, and they say, oh, number 35 is coming in, they need to know who 35 is. Like simple things like that. It has to be good. I've always said, and this is not political, but the best speaker always wins the presidency. This year, who knows? But usually that's always the case. The speakers, the guys doing the commentary, are what really, really matter, I think. And the race kind of is itself. I mean, last year's race with Jim and Rob was fantastic because they were close at the end.
Right.
That needs to happen again. If Jim runs away and he's an hour and a half ahead, the story's not going to be as good. When Tiger was 12 shots ahead at the Masters going into the last day, we just watched Tiger play,
Right.
So, but it was a good analogy about Tiger and how they came in with golf, because he still, when Tiger plays, it's a different tournament.
That's the only time I turn it on.
He doesn't even make the cut.
Yeah.
Right.
He's a special figure in the sport, and ultra running has the opportunity. Killian is a special figure in the sport. I'm glad he wanted to jump in Western. He just did what he needed to do to get in the race. He will bring a lot to that race. Do I think he'll beat Jim? I don't think he'll beat Jim unless Jim blows up. But Jim's a little faster on the track meet type races. But I think Killian there needs to be some story around him a little bit too. And he's usually very kind of quiet on the side a little bit. He's not, he does his thing, but they need to involve him too, because he's the greatest mountain runner in the world. I don't think there's any debate on that. And I know Jim might give me shit about that if we had a conversation, but I think he needs to be in that part of that film, and those guys really just need to do their homework.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think what we're aligning on here is that U.S. trail needs a disruptor. Like the commentary, Corinne, Debo. They do their best for what their experience level is with something like that. Like they were trail runners, passionate trail runners who then turned to the microphone. And what you see in like the European Golden Trail Series, or on those French channels, is that they're professional broadcasters. There's just levels. There's levels to trail runners. Like on this podcast, you're the GOAT, and we're just sitting here admiring you, right? And then there's levels on the microphone in the broadcasting booth, and like we just have to be able to honestly acknowledge that. So maybe the issue isn't who's presenting title sponsor, but who's in the broadcasting booth, speaking about the actual race. And maybe we need to get outside of our bubble and stop giving the microphone to people who, we maybe know because they were trail runners in the previous decades. Just give it to the best guy on the microphone.
Let me ask you this question while we wait for him to come back online.
Yeah.
What would make Nike the better choice? Like what do you think they practically could do that, I mean, assuming that Western States allows it, what could make them the better one?
Yeah, I think so they're unapologetic. Like they are going to colonize, for lack of a better word. They're going to come in and they're going to take over it. They're not going to make apologies or play nicely or adhere to like old rules. They're going to establish their own. Granite Chief, if Nike got involved, that would be an issue I think that they would overcome.
I'm going to mark this because you need to say all this again when he's back, because that's good.
Like it's Nike, right? Like they're offensive and they do things that are better that are at the benefit of their bottom line or at progressing their brand and shaping culture. And so they're not wanting to enter into the sport, because if they are, they're going to enter 100%. It's 0 or 100 with Nike. They're not just going to participate in the background. So that's why we kind of see them as kind of a non-factor. You know what I mean?
I love that.
So that's why I think if we got Nike involved, then it would be, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You can't get the genie back in the bottle. Like I might be saying that was a shitty idea, but that's, I think, the direction that I'm saying that, we need to figure this thing out. And it seems like Karl kind of agrees without, fully agreeing that Nike's the right person, but he agrees that Hoka's kind of a bit lukewarm in the place. And, there's a lot of other challenges. And like we said, the board at Western States or whatever it is that's behind that is complicit as well. And so Hoka just kind of navigates what, lane they can find themselves in.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought it was fascinating though, when I went on Hoka's website and I was looking to see like, where can I find the link to their partnerships or professional trail runners. So again, they have nothing but, Clifton 10 news and, you see all the lifestyle stuff and, basically just like the paid models who may or may not be actual runners, right? So you finally find a tab that says Explore. And then within Explore, you find partnerships. And then underneath partnerships is UTMB, Ironman, and lifestyle collabs, right? But there's nothing about their actual Western States, partnership. So you have UTMB and Ironman, but they don't even, make reference on their own Hoka website to Western States, which I think is kind of a backhanded slap in the face if I were on the board of Western States and,
I can tell you, sorry, I disappeared there for a little bit.
No, welcome back. I think we just had a good practice.
It's amazing.
Had a good
for me.
Had a good practice. I'm gonna have Wolfie say something again that he said, because I said, well, hey, I'm just gonna tee it up. What would make Nike the better partner? Like, what's that position that makes Nike the better partner? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I said with Nike, it's pretty much all or nothing. They're either going to participate at 100%. Or they're going to be indifferent. And we're seeing the indifferent 0% Nike right now. And so when I kind of, fantasize what it would look like, they would be insulting. Like I think when Nike comes in, they come in with a bit of an arrogance. And I think that's what rubs me the wrong way and a lot of others. And, they don't cater to rules. They don't cater to, unspoken rules, boards, history, legacy. They're Nike. They're coming in and they're going to do what's necessary, I think, for their bottom line and for their narrative and culture that they want to, put onto the sport that they're engaging in. And so Granite Chief, that's an issue. They're going to figure it out. Maybe the sport's not going to like it, the diehards, but, they might figure a way. It might look entirely different. They might come in and they might move Western States into Arizona.
Yeah.
Who
knows, right? I mean, you're right.
They have no limitations.
Granite Chief, probably somehow there's a way to get around that wilderness. With that, you're right. So many people would be like, no, it's not the same Western States. And they'd be right. It's not the same course. The course has pretty much been the same all the years, and the fire thing changed things a little bit, but that's fire. But yeah, I think you're right though. I think they would come in with the arrogance and say, this is how we're going to do it. Boom. And with the Ironman thing, I think it was funny you mentioned, Ironman's never mentioned in that they purchased. They don't mention that they purchased Speedgoat. They don't mention that they purchased, these 6 races in the country. And to be honest with you, I went to a meeting in Denver with Ironman about stuff in February one year. And one of the rules of the meeting was to not mention the word Ironman. Whoever said the word Ironman had to buy the beers for everyone at night, right? So why is that? Why does Ironman come in and buy these races and then not want their name on? Oh, maybe not all over the place, but why do they not want people to know that? That seems odd to me, you know. Um, that was really really weird when I was at that meeting. Like, I'm not supposed to say Ironman. Like, this is who bought my race, you know. It was weird. But yeah, you got to go all in, like you said, and you've got to let change happen sometimes. And a lot of times it's for the better, sometimes it's for the worse. But I think it's gotta change, and like Hard Rock's got to change because they never, they talk about all this crap, but it never happens. You
You know,
got
when
to.
we say it, it just sounds like a couple guys who love the sport who have strong opinions. That you say that, like, I hope that I mean that holds weight. This isn't my debate. I just love that you're saying these things because we totally, I mean, more or
Well,
less
I mean,
agree.
it's the real deal, you know. Like I've never been one to like shy away from my views. Sometimes people don't like what I say, and I never mean to offend anyone, of course not. But at the same time, it's like, it is what it is. The reality of the deal is that you're you're hiding from getting bigger. You talk about the growth of the sport, but then you're sort of, Western states is like, well, you can't have that banner here. You can't make it big like that. This is our race. Hard Rock, this is our deal. Well, then they talk about growing the sport. They're contradicting each other all the time. You could make it happen or don't. The other debate is drug testing. And we won't even go there for yet, right? But that's a whole nother topic of debate, because that's not even in the realm of this whole thing. That has to be part of the storyline too at some point, unfortunately, because if the sport gets bigger and more people are racing harder, I mean, there's going to be more suspects out there of cheating, and it's like, I mean, you got to bring it out to the forefront and show the people what's going on. You can't just keep hiding in the corner. And Western States is always going to get their entries. I mean, they could charge $2,000 an entry fee. They'd get it. People would want to run that race. So why? I mean, I don't even think the course is that great, but you know, um, they'd get it. But they just want to sit in their bubble a little bit. And it says, "All right, Gordy, when Gordy ran this route first, he made Western States. It was great." Um, but it's, I would. It would be cool if there were more people in the race. If they just get around that wilderness area. I think they're lucky they go through there at all. Hard Rock had the same deal with the Grizzly Wilderness and over Handy's Peak too. We had to change a route there, and Forest Service and BLM worked with them on it. And now it's and they go through the wilderness area a little bit, but those things have to change. And in the U.S. is very very hard to change. The Forest Service in the U.S. is very different than Europe. Europeans are just like when you go through Saint Gervais at UTMB, the entire town is lining the streets. Yeah, there's a few people at Forest Hill. Okay, great. There's a few people at Robinson Flat. Okay, it's not the same. Maybe Western, like I said earlier, is Western. Maybe they'll learn from the Europeans about sport. This sport is growing exponentially. How do we grow it properly without blowing it? If blowing is the right word, but um, and again, Europe's very different. They like their single individual sports as opposed to U.S., who are the couch potato football, baseball watchers, and that's fine. Do what you want, but it's just different, man. I just I don't know. Western is such a great competitive race. I just wish they would just blow it out of the water one year and see what happens. You can always turn it back if you want.
Yeah. When I was getting ready for the AJW debate, I found Thornley's quote about prize money, and his response was that it goes against the principles and morals of the board. And so it's like when you've got somebody at the helm who's steering that ship, and he's that rigid, he's that orthodox about prize money, saying that it contradicts the morals of the nonprofit. I mean, yeah, I don't think anything's going to change until
No, it's
that
it's it's
changes.
it's funny. Like, it's like, come on, you guys. Like, these guys train. they talk even track runners in the U.S. 10 years ago. Nobody's making any money. It's like these guys train their life off. When I was working at Snowbird, I worked all winter. I saved my quarters in an 1800 Cuervo bottle every year. I had like 6 bottles. It was $1,000, and I spent it on running. So I'm not making any money, right? Runners deserve to make money. I mean, the amount of time and the training it takes to be at the top level is hard, And saying, well, we don't want to give these guys any prize money because, well, it's not part of this, what it's about. But it's like, no, it is about. It would be nice if the guy who wins Western takes home $100,000. He can support himself. He can support his wife or whatever. And it's these old school race directors just don't want to step into that, And I think it sucks, I was when Fred Abramowitz at Running Our sitting in that Hard Rock gym talking about a race with prize money, and Fred said he could pull it off, and I was just like, really? How are you going to do that? And basically it was like, well, we won't take any profit. We'll give it to the runners. And Fred didn't care. He gave it to the runners because he wanted to see, he never thought I'd win that first year. And I was like, here you go, Fred. I made 10 grand, It's funny, like certain generations just don't want to see that change. And they just don't, It's like even me being a ski bum at Snowbird, and I was there from starting the 90s. In 89, I moved there. And those years of the 90s, we worked at night. We skied hard all day. The lines weren't that long. Now the lines are like out of control long. The traffic's bad. There's no parking, all this. So we don't want to see change. But the reality of it is, and I've said this before, is that people keep having babies. There's not any more land, and everything's just it just gets bigger, You have to expect it to grow, and we just have the old school race directors have to understand this is what happens when it grows. We just have to learn how to control it, but still support the runners in a way that they can make a living from it. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I make a living from it. I don't make a living from paying me to run, but from other angles, I've made a living from it, and it's been great. It's amazing I pulled it off, but I think there should be so many runners out there that can just, make at least 100 grand a year and say, okay, I can make a living at this and pay my mortgage. So many people just aren't. We're living in vans. Anton Krupishka's living in the back of his truck for 5 years. And I like that lifestyle. I like the dirtbag lifestyle, but it doesn't really pay the bills.
No.
It doesn't save for your retirement. These runners
you can do that as you're coming up, but once
their
you
longevity
make it,
is short.
yeah.
You can only race so fast for so long. And now, like when I first ran Wasatch, I was 29 or 30, and there might have been 2 or 3 people under the age of 30. Now there's a lot, so it's grown. It started at a younger age now, but how long does it really last? I mean, till they're 35, and all of a sudden they start getting slower, and then it's like, well, then your sponsor cuts you, and then you're like, well, now what? Well, I made $7,000 last year, and like, okay, that money needs to come in to really make the sport blow out.
Yeah. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Let me tell you what happened. Sorry, all of a sudden my Alexa starts freaking out and going crazy over here. I don't know why. So I had to run over there and just unplug it because I didn't want to yell from here, Alexa, off,
It heard us say Speedgoat, and it started ripping off all of his accomplishments. And
it started playing Leonard Skinner. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, so this is closing thoughts. 2 minutes from each of you. Any closing thoughts on it? Just been a very enjoyable discussion. I think
Wolfie, go first.
I think we're all aligned here on we want to see the sport come up, and there's some things getting in the way, and maybe Nike could be the one that breaks us through, much to our chagrin. Maybe not, but Wolfie, what do you think? 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it almost in every single one of these debates, and every guest kind of just solidifies and cements that Western States just has an identity crisis. I think it looks at Hard Rock and envies its abilities to live in the shadows while still being a premier and beloved race, but without any of the pressures or conversations, because we don't talk about Hard Rock like we do Western States. And, I think Western States just kind of, the board and everybody that's involved with it, they kind of envy Hard Rock being able to live in the shadow. So yeah, no matter what we're talking about, again, I think it's just limited by, the closed-minded lack of, opportunity and growth that those in control of the race have right now. So yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, Hoka, we didn't talk about footwear. I mean, clearly I'm, going to be a bigger endorser of the Hoka footwear and lineup than Nike. The shoes are horrible to me, in my opinion. But yeah, as far as being an ambassador, maybe just embrace a little bit more of that, that black pirate flag, like go over there and shake things up, Hoka, Karl, whatever you can do with encouraging those at Hoka to be a little bit more of a disruptor, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, I've been asked to get in, and to be honest with you, it's tough. I'm the old guy, 57. I'm trying to throw in my 2 cents a lot of times, and it's one guy's opinion. It's like I've always wanted it to be um, a sport where people can make money at it. And again, like you said, someone needs to come in and shake it up, and no one's really shaking it up quite yet. I think UTMB wants to shake it up, but if you talk to the Palettis even, and I've spoken with them a number of times, I know them, they talk about sustainability and all this types of stuff, and it's not really sustainability. They're blowing it out of the water with their thing, but they need to like embrace blowing it out of the water instead of saying we're going to try to blow it out of there. It's kind of like a hard sale or a hard push on a new product, and not a hard push. I forget what it's called, like a soft launch and a hard launch. It's all still always a soft launch right now. There's no hard launch. Someone needs to step up, exactly what you said, to make this crazy. And I think you're right about Western. They envy the Hard Rock guys because they're like, hey man, it's our little race. It's around the San Juans. We get 145 people we allow in the race. Their permit is for 220. A lot of people don't know that, and maybe I shouldn't have told people that. But at the same time, I'm going to tell people that it's 220. But the reason they don't do it is because they want to embrace the soul of the sport, as AJW mentioned. You don't want to have too many people on the trail. Yet there's 75. There's 200 media passes. And so when I started running that race, 1999 was my first year. My first finish was 2001. There might have been a couple photographers out there. Now there's 150 photographers lining up the first 15 miles of the course. And, if you want the sport to be big and you want it to grow, that's what you're going to see. It's just reality. Don't kid yourself. That's the deal. But yeah, Western States probably likes the fact that Hard Rock kind of is in their own bubble. And, they claim to have no money for their budget. Well, that's because you don't promote the stuff, Like
Right.
even their title sponsors at Hard Rock don't get nearly the same money as Western does. But Hard Rock gets plenty of, or some, we'll call it some internet exposure. They just don't blow it out, man. And I'd like to see it blown out just to see what happens with it. You don't really know what's going to happen. When Hoka put that first shoe on my foot, 2009, and then I fell at Zane Grey, and everybody thought I fell because of the shoes and broke my arm because of the shoes. The company almost went under because of that, at that very beginning. Almost. But then
Right.
I tried to explain, like, hey, I was crawling over a tree and I fell backwards on my arm. But yeah, you got to put it out there. When Nico and John Luke put it out there, they didn't know what to expect. They didn't have any money. But then look what happened. It all became good, right?
Yep.
That can happen in ultra running if someone steps up and changes the world. And maybe it's the big rich guy or maybe not, but that's what's got to happen, or it's just going to be the same thing in 10 years. We're going to be sitting here and chatting again. Why hasn't it changed much?
Right.
I mean, I like small races too, but I like watching the big ones as well.
Yeah, I want the big ones to be big. I think that's where we
Yep.
can leave it. Is like, let the small be small and let's let the big just be massive, right? Like no apologies for being big and
There's plenty of room for everyone, plenty of races out there.
Yeah.
totally.
Well, Karl, an absolute pleasure to have you on. An ending story here. I was running Paris Marathon the other day in this shirt.
Oh, nice.
Some guy with a French accent came up to me and told me he liked my shirt. And I think, this not only is the Speedgoat race an iconic race, the Speedgoat shoe an iconic shoe. The year of this shirt is, I see people it's a nod. I don't remember what year this was. 21.
It's the greatest shirt in ultra running,
It's the most recognizable. I posted something on Instagram and someone's like, and you couldn't even see this. It was just like, oh, that's the Speedgoat. You got the Speedgoat shirt on at a road marathon.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
Yeah, man. So I just appreciate you and me living in Salt Lake for 22 years. What you did for Salt Lake with the Speedgoat being kind of a it was a local vibe. It was kind of a it was not a local vibe, but a thing that the locals did. It was a proving it was what you do. Wasatch, you do Speedgoat, you do Kachina Mosa, you do those races as a local. You got to do them. Yeah. And so I just thank you for all that you did for Salt Lake. I know you're in Colorado now.
It's been a great ride for sure.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. I look forward to releasing this episode and hopefully seeing you around at some point.
Right on. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Wolfie. It was great talking to you. Good meeting you.
Nice meeting you, man.